Let's start today with a new push for Canada to boost its defense spending commitments. And this time, the call is coming from the head of NATO himself while here on home soil. A new report from the alliance shows a record number of 23 member countries. More than 2/3 of the alliance are set to hit the agreed upon spending target of 2% of GDP on defense. But Canada is still not among them. The latest NATO estimates show Canada will spend 1.37% of GDP on defense this year. More than that, though, Canada is the only member of the alliance without a plan to hit NATO's target. And Defense Minister Bill Blair was asked again about that this week.
Let me assure you that we've been doing a great deal of work within our Defense Department, with the Government of Canada, but also with our NATO allies. It results in historic and strong upward trajectory of defense spending for Canada.
The NATO Leaders Summit, meanwhile, is coming up in Washington in just a few weeks, where defense spending and the war in Ukraine are expected to be sharply in focus. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg was in Ottawa earlier this week to preview that summit. I spoke with him for an exclusive broadcast interview while he was here. Have a listen to our conversation. Hi, Secretary General. A pleasure to have you back on our show. Thanks so much for making the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
You met with Prime Minister Trudeau during your visit in Ottawa. Did he convey to you that Canada will have a plan to get to NATO's target of 2% of GDP on defense spending?
Well, of course, we discussed many issues, including defense spending, but I will leave it to him to make announcements on behalf of Canada. What I can say is that I expect all allies to meet the target of spending 2% of GDP on defense, because we live in a more dangerous world, and therefore we need to invest more in our defense and our security. And I welcome the increase we have seen in Canada over the last years, but I expect more.
Why does a plan matter?
It matters that all allies have a credible plan to reach the goal we have agreed together. I think we have to realize that when the Cold War ended, all allies reduced defense spending significantly. But now, when tensions are going up and we see a new full-fledged war in Europe, we see more global great power rivalry, then it is important that we again invest. And we have agreed together in NATO to invest more, and therefore expect all allies to either be there or at least have a credible plan to be there soon.
Do you think that mindset has changed? You referenced there after the Cold War how defense spending went down in times of greater security, especially spending has now decreased and then increased as the world gets more insecure, and that you'd like to see it continue increase. Do you think that mindset going forward will change? Those ebbs and flows will level out, and that higher levels of spending will essentially become the norm just because of the experience we've had over the past number of years?
Yes, I expect that, especially if the tensions we see now globally continues. Because when we reduce defense spending when tensions are going down, we have to be able to increase defense spending when tensions are going up. The good news is that back in 2014, when we made the decision to spend 2% of GDP across the alliance, only 3 allies met that target. This year, 2024, we expect 23 allies to spend 2%, and those who are not yet at 2%, we expect them to have a plan to be there soon. So this is a huge change, and also Canada has been part of that, because if you compare with 2014, when we made the decision, there has been significant increases in Canadian defense spending, enabling Canada to make important contributions to our collective defense. Canada leads one of our battle groups in the eastern part of the alliance in Latvia, and Canada is providing first-class planes, ships to NATO missions and operations. So we welcome Canada and what Canada does for our shared security, but many allies have more to do, and we are moving in the right direction.
Let me ask you about that, because what you just laid out, Canada's contribution, is certainly what the federal government says here when they get question after question after question about the NATO target. If Canada's contributions are as you described them and as the federal government describes them, and they are going in the right direction, again, why does it matter? I mean, the number has been called in our parliament an arbitrary number.
Well, it is a number we have agreed to have some kind of burden sharing, because when we say a percentage of GDP, that means that, of course, those with a great economy or big economy, they pay more than those with the small economies. So this is a way to reflect a level of burden sharing between NATO allies, the 32 NATO allies with very different size of their economy and their national income. So the percentage of GDP is a way to reflect that burden sharing. Then, of course, what matters at the end of the day is that allies deliver on what we call the NATO capability targets. As part of our defense plans, we have agreed specific forces, readiness levels that all allies should deliver. And for most allies to deliver on those capability targets, they need to spend at least 2%. So this is partly about how much to spend, but very much also about actually the output of what we expect allies to deliver when it comes to forces. I understand it's difficult to allocate money for defense because most politicians, they of course prefer to spend money on health, on education, on infrastructure, and I fully understand that. But if we're not able to preserve peace, to have credible deterrence, then we risk the most important thing of all, and that is peace. And without peace, we will not succeed in addressing all the other important issues: climate change, health, prosperity. So peace is a precondition for everything else.
I just have a moment for a couple more questions, but before I do let you go, your time at NATO, a decade now, is coming to an end. This week you made some comments that were very interesting to me around sort of the alignment of more autocratic countries and how NATO as an alliance can counter that. In particular, you talked about greater alignment with the Indo-Pacific to counter, for example, the threat China poses. Do you ever envision that alignment to result in a formal arrangement?
Our partners in the Asia-Pacific, also South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, they are partners, so we have a formal relationship with them. But I don't envisage that we will have collective security guarantees, also Article 5, the idea of NATO that an attack on one will be regarded as an attack on all. That's for North America and Europe. But it is important that we work more closely with our Asia-Pacific partners, because we see how authoritarian nations, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, are aligning more and more. And we see that in particular in Ukraine. China is propping up the Russian war economy, enabling Russia to conduct a war of aggression against Ukraine. Iran is delivering drones. North Korea has delivered over 1 million artillery shells. So when they are more aligned, when they support each other, it's even more important that NATO stands together, but also that we work more closely with our partners in the Indo-Pacific, Japan, South Korea, and others. So this is what we're going also to address at the Washington summit next month, because the heads of state and government from our Asia-Pacific partners will be there.
Secretary General, the world has changed so much in the decade that you've been in the job, basically 10 years later. What keeps you up at night?
First of all, I'm very good at sleeping. But second, I don't see any imminent threat against any NATO ally. And that's because of NATO. You know, NATO's core task, main responsibility is actually not to fight the war, but it's to prevent the war. And the way NATO has prevented war for more than 75 years is to make it absolutely clear to any potential adversary that an attack on one ally will trigger a response from the whole alliance. And as long as that is credible, then there will be no military attack against any NATO ally, because we are by far the strongest military force in the world, 50% of the world's economic might and 50% of the world's military might. So in a more dangerous world, it is even more important that North America are standing together as we do in NATO.
I'll leave it on that note, Secretary General. A real pleasure. I appreciate your insights today, and best of luck in your future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you so much.